Hey everybody, welcome to That's Good Sports. I am Brandon Perna, and this is your Vikings versus Broncos game prediction episode. How this works is I pit each positional group against each other, like the offensive line versus the offensive line, and then I award the stronger group a point. At the end of the episode, I tally all the points, and I predict who will win the game. If you followed me, you know I am 3 for 3 on the season, and that this is the best and only way to predict games. Am I psychic? Yes. Please tweet this video out to major sports networks or sports personalities and tell them I am better than them and to give me a gosh darn job. I keep waiting for the Broncos to have a clearly favorable matchup, and guess what? That is not going to happen against Minnesota. The Broncos are 3-0 and the Vikings are 2-1 with wins over Detroit and San Diego. Thank you, Minnesota. 24-12 and 26-16 were the nearly identical winning scores the Broncos and Vikings put up against Detroit. Based on those stats alone, I'd say the Vikings and Broncos are pretty much the same team. I'll immediately give the Broncos a half a point for home field advantage. Gary Kubiak versus Mike Zimmer. Both coaches are tied for having equally cool last names, and both coaches currently lead teams with dominant defenses. Zimmer is a great defensive coach who's had success on that side of the ball no matter where he's been. But I'm giving Kubiak a half-point advantage for his performance last week against Detroit. It's clear Kubiak is going to work with Manning in terms of adapting the offense for success. Peyton Manning versus Teddy. Bridge over troubled water. I like Teddy Bridgewater, and I think he has a bright future in the NFL. But he's a second-year QB facing a ferocious defense on the road. He has Adrian Peterson to lean on, but I don't like his current 1 touchdown to 2 interception ratio. Against the Chargers, he threw an early pick in the red zone, and what would have been a second pick dropped by the Chargers' Patrick Robinson in the first quarter. The Vikings' defense is just as nasty as Denver's, but I have to go with Manning's experience to handle it better than Bridgewater. 1-point Broncos. Adrian Peterson versus the stable. Adrian Peterson didn't look great until he exploded against the Chargers for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. He averaged 6.3 yards per carry in that game, which is about the length of the Broncos' longest run against the Lions. The Chargers do have one of the worst run defenses in the league, but until Denver shows me something in the run game, Minnesota has the clear advantage here, especially against an aggressive Denver defense that may over-pursue the quarterback at times, leaving running lanes for Adrian Peterson. 1-point Minnesota. Offensive line versus offensive line. The Broncos' beefy front made progress against the Lions and improved significantly in pass protection. Evan Mathis had his best game of the year and finished as the highest-rated offensive player for the Broncos on Pro Football Focus. Ryan Harris, Luis Vasquez, and Matt Paradis also avoided negative grades against Detroit. Ty Sambrailo is still struggling and is injured, but relief may be on the way as the Broncos signed Tyler Columbus, an offensive tackle who has experience playing within the system. Minnesota's big man dude boys up front from left to right are Matt Khalil, Brandon Fusco, Joe Berger, Michael Harris, and rookie TJ Clemmings. TJ Clemmings is playing better than Ty Sambrailo. Both guys have a 2-letter first name, and it should be noted Clemmings was drafted in the 4th round, 2 after Sambrailo. The Vikings line has shown more consistency this season, and right now, their center, Joe Berger, great name for an NFL center, is leading the charge as one of the best centers in the league. Half-point advantage, Vikings. Mike Wallace and Charles Johnson and Kyle Rudolph and Rhett Ellison versus Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Owen Daniels, and Virgil Green. That was excessive, I know. Vikings, quarterback, check. Offensive line, check. Running back, check. Elite wide receiver, The wide receiver position is an area of deficiency for Minnesota. Mike Wallace and Charles Johnson are serviceable, and Wallace does have big play potential, but they are by no means giving opposing secondaries night terrors, which I get if I watched Dancing with the Stars before bed. Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas, and possibly Benny Fowler, have a clear advantage here. Right now, the Vikings are getting better play from their tight ends. Rudolph and Ellison mirror the roles of Daniels and Green. I believe Daniels and Manning just need more time to improve their timing. Imagine that. You need time to work on your timing. The interesting thing is that Virgil Green, who's known for being a terrific blocker, is struggling in that department, while the Vikings' Rhett Ellison and Kyle Rudolph are excelling. However, I think Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, or Colonel Handers, as Jake Plummer called them in our podcast, In the Huddle, which you can see right here on the Mile High Huddle, are truly elite receivers, earning the Broncos a half-point advantage. Defensive line versus defensive line. Like the Lions, the Vikings run a 4-3 defense, but unlike Detroit, they excel as a pass rushing team in addition to being fairly stout against the run. This, in my opinion, gives them an advantage against the Broncos, who need to give Manning time to throw the ball. Last week, the Vikings beat the shit out of Phillip Rivers, sacking him 4 times, hitting him 8, and hurrying him on 12 plays. Brian Robinson is their stud pass rusher coming off the left edge. On the other side, you have Everson Griffin, who hit Rivers 4 times last week, and on the inside, there are 2 beasts in Linval Joseph and Sharif Floyd, who, as a tandem, will be the toughest tackles the Broncos have faced this season. Imagine if the Broncos had 2 Sylvester Williams on the line, and both guys were playing better than Sylvester Williams. That's what the Vikings have, 1 point Minnesota. Linebackers versus linebackers. On the inside, the Broncos have Brandon Marshall and Danny Trevathan. The Vikings have Gerald Hodges. Again, the Broncos utilize 4 linebackers and the Vikings 3. On the outside, the Broncos dominate with Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware, even though teams are starting to find some success running in Ware's direction. Minnesota has an elite outside linebacker in Anthony Barr, who can pass rush, run stop, and drop into coverage. Last week, the Vikings switched Chad Greenway and Barr, moving Greenway to the weak side, where he played significantly better than in his first 2 games. Barr seems to play well no matter where he is on the field. So, for the first week in the season, I think the Vikings linebackers are equally as good as Denver's. This is a wash. Brandon Marshall, Danny Trevathan, I'm looking to you to show me something against Adrian Peterson. Secondary versus secondary. Nobody has a better secondary than Denver, right? 1 point Broncos. Uh-oh. Hold on. Minnesota is pretty stacked on defense. Aqib Talib and Minnesota's Captain Munnerlyn are tied in Pro Football Focus with a plus 4.1 rating. The Vikings left corner Terrence Newman has a plus 3.3 rating, which is ahead of Chris Harris right now. Think of Munnerlyn as Minnesota's Bradley Roby, who plays as their 3rd corner. Their starting corner on the right side is Xavier Rhodes, who is the wink link at that positional group. At safety, Minnesota has Harrison Smith, a man so good he employs 2 last names and is currently ranked as the #1 safety in the NFL. He is terrific in both pass and run coverage. Fortunately for Denver, Minnesota's strong safety, Andrew Sendejo, not to be confused with Pindejo, that's for you, Pueblo, is not playing nearly as well as TJ Ward, who had a great game against Detroit. Denver gets a 2.5 advantage in the secondary. Special teams versus special teams. Half point here for the Broncos. Brandon McManus still hasn't missed a field goal. I like him at home, and the Vikings punter, Jeff Locke, is ranked dead last in the league, as his photo here would suggest. Let's total it up. Denver finishes with a 3.25 score and the Vikings with a 2.5 score. So as this score would suggest, the Broncos have a slight advantage, and that's why I'm going to give them a slight victory, but in reality, it's a big victory. The final score of 24-17, Broncos win, take it home. Thanks for watching another episode of That's Good Broncos. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, That's Good Sports, and share this video. Please go onto Twitter and tweet this out. Tweet it out to Dan Patrick and all of the Danettes. Tweet it out to Rich Eisen. Tweet it out to CBS. Tweet it out to Showtime. Tweet it out to Jim Rome, who's on Showtime, which I believe would be a great place for me to have a home because I could say the word shit there. I need your guys' help to give me a job that pays me money, is what I'm saying.